Hello everyone, and welcome back to Thrifted Moments. Today I want to share a find that genuinely surprised me. One of those moments where expectations are low, curiosity wins out, and you end up with something you've wanted for a very long time. This video is all about a Goofus glass berry set that I purchased through an online auction. I've always wanted a piece of Goofus glass, but I'd never quite found the right piece at the right time until this auction listing appeared. The auction company was only about an hour and a half away from my home, and when I saw the lot listed, I placed a small bid, $7. I honestly didn't expect much to come of it, so when I got the notice that I'd won, I was very happy. After taxes and the auction fee, the grand total came to just over $9. Sometimes the thrill of the find starts even before you pick it up. And this was one of those cases. We made an early spring drive to the town where the auction gallery was located, enjoying the twisted country roads and the quiet country scenery. At one point, we passed a rafter of wild turkeys on someone's front lawn. One of those little moments that remind you why these drives are part of the fun. The online listing itself didn't give me much to go on. It was simply described as, quote, lot of 7 painted pressed glass bowls, roses, unquote. There were 4 photos, but none highlighted what ultimately made the set interesting or unusual. Despite not being listed as a berry set, that is how this set would generally be described. Berry sets were common in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They typically consisted of one larger bowl called a master berry and 6 smaller bowls referred to as nappies. Historically, these would have been used to serve berries and cream. A complete set usually included the large bowl and 6 matching smaller ones. When we arrived at the auction gallery, the person assisting us mentioned something right away. The set wasn't quite a match. I was a little surprised because that was not obvious in the photos from the listing, nor was it mentioned in the description. 5 of the nappies were very similar in shape, though even among those, there were 2 slightly different profiles. Some were a little bit more flared than others. And then there was one nappy that looked almost the same at a glance, but had a different flower pattern. Most of the pieces featured a rose motif, but this one nappy had a different bloom. To me, it looked more like a poppy. What tied them all together was the decoration, red flowers with gold paint filling in the rest of the design. Once I had everything home, I did what I always do. I set aside a quiet afternoon with a hot cup of tea and started researching. I went straight to the Early American Pattern Glass Society Pattern Identification Database and opened the advanced search options. Given the obvious characteristics, bowls with floral motifs, I expected the search to narrow down fairly quickly. Advanced search is always preferred when searching the database. One of the helpful things about the EAPG database is that floral patterns are grouped together. You don't need to know the exact flower name going in, which was especially helpful since I was now looking at 2 different flowers. I started with roses, scrolling through to the R section, assuming the word rose would be part of the pattern name. That's where I found the pattern listed as Rose Ware, also known as La Belle Rose, by the Lancaster Glass Company in Ohio. This pattern was introduced in 1910, placing it near the end of what many collectors consider the early American pattern glass period. After identifying the rose pattern, I went back to the database to try to find the odd bowl out. Given how similar the overall design and form were, I suspected the same manufacturer. That's when I came across Carnation, or Carnation Ware, introduced in 1911, just 1 year after the rose pattern. While technically outside the strictest definition of EAPG, it still fits within that transitional period where styles and production methods overlapped. If you're new to antique glass collecting, early American pattern glass, or EAPG, generally refers to pressed glass made in North America between 1850 and roughly 1910. Some collectors and organizations extend that period slightly into the early 1910s, and honestly, that makes sense. Like most historical periods, there isn't a hard cutoff. Styles, techniques, and molds didn't suddenly stop on December 31st of 1909. Pressed glass patterns continued to evolve, overlap, and be reused, especially as companies were bought, merged, or absorbed into larger corporations. The Lancaster Glass Company was founded in 1908 in Lancaster, Ohio, by Lucien Martin and his son Philip. Though sometimes considered a smaller player in the pressed glass industry, Lancaster produced an impressive range of high-quality pieces during that relatively short lifespan. In 1924, Hawking Glass Company acquired a controlling interest in Lancaster, eventually dissolving the Lancaster name entirely by 1937. Even after that, Lancaster's molds lived on. Many were reused for decades by Hawking and later Anchor Hawking, which means Lancaster's influence extended well beyond its official years of operation. So where does Goofus glass fit into all this? Well, Goofus glass is essentially pressed glass that has been cold painted, meaning the paint was applied after molding and never fired. Because of that, the paint sits on the surface rather than bonding with the glass. Flaking paint is very common with these pieces. Originally, this type of glass was marketed under much more glamorous names like Oriental Art, Golden Oriental, and Intaglio art. It was bold, decorative, and very popular from roughly the late 1890s into the early decades of the 20th century. Goofus glass was often given away as a premium at movie theaters, gas stations, and stores. It was accessible, cheerful, and never meant to last forever. Ironically, that impermanence is part of what makes intact examples so desirable today. Because Goofus glass is cold painted, it requires very gentle care. It should never go in the dishwasher and should be handled as little as possible. Even repeated light handling can cause paint loss over time. My set is already showing signs of flaking, which I actually don't mind. It's honest wear for a century of existence. But because of that fragility, these bowls will be for display only. If I stack them, I'll use a buffer between them, such as a thick, soft cloth or pieces of paper towel. They won't be used, and they definitely won't be washed beyond the most careful dry dusting. Before I wrap up, I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the early American Pattern Glass Society. Their pattern identification database is the largest, most accurate, and most complete resource of its kind. Since 2010, they've systematically collected, cataloged, and identified and verified patterns using primary source materials whenever possible. As of 2022, the database contained over 7,000 patterns and more than 60,000 photographs. These were contributed by knowledgeable and dedicated members, and it continues to grow. They are a nonprofit organization, and the work they do is invaluable to collectors, researchers, and historians alike. You can explore their database and learn more about their work at eapgs.org. This little $9 auction win turned out to be far more than I expected. a charming example of Goofus glass, and a reminder that sometimes the most interesting finds are the ones that are not a perfect set. Before I go, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever had a not quite a set turn into a favorite piece? Tell me about it down in the comments. I generally love hearing your collecting stories. Thank you so much for spending this thrifted moment with me. If you enjoyed this deep dive into antique glass, I hope you'll consider liking, subscribing, and joining me again for the next find.